Today we're diving into a question I hear a lot. Do guitar players really need to learn to read music? This can be a bit of a hot topic among musicians, so we're going to explore different angles, from kids to adults, studio players, rock and roll musicians, and even what it means to be a good reader. So if you've ever wondered whether you're missing out by not learning to read standard music notation, stick around. For those of you who are new here, I'm Barry, and I make guitar tutorials, performance tips, and more to help you get the most out of your playing. If that sounds good to you, make sure to hit that subscribe. Now let's get started. So first of all, I'm coming at this from a music teacher and performer perspective. I've been reading sheet music since the 4th grade, and even went to college on a trombone scholarship to study music education. So I am a good reader, but I've also played the guitar for just as long. I started playing in garage bands in 6th grade and been doing gigs since the 7th grade. I also studied a bit of jazz guitar when I was in college, so I think I have a pretty unique perspective. So with all that being said, let's start with kids. When I'm teaching young students, I always make sure to include reading music as part of their lessons. Kids have their whole musical journey ahead of them, and honestly, you never know where they'll end up. Maybe they'll want to join a school band, study classical guitar, or even work as a session player. Having that foundation in reading can open doors down the line, giving them the tools to adapt to different musical paths as they grow. So for kids, I think it's really important. So I always try to include some music staff reading at the start of every lesson, followed by going into the preferred genre of music. This seems to give the students a strong musical foundation, but still keeping their interest. Now when it comes to adults, my approach shifts just a little bit. Most of the adults I teach are learning guitar as a personal goal or hobby. For them, I usually don't focus heavily on reading the staff, but I always teach music theory. Why? Because theory helps us communicate and understand the basics of music, things like chord structure, rhythm, and progression. It gives you that foundation to talk and think like a musician, even if you're not reading every note off of a page. I stress the importance of really listening to the music you're playing along to and trying to hear the progression in terms of the numbers of the scale, like the Nashville number system. One perspective that's always interesting to me comes from the studio world. You might know guitarist Tim Pierce. He's a renowned session player, and he's talked about the difference it makes when you can read music as a studio musician. Tim has seen it firsthand. There are studio players who get called back time and time again because they can sight read music on the spot. They're valuable in that setting because they can walk in, pick up sheet music, and nail the part quickly. Then there are the fantastic players who can't read standard notation, and while they still get work, they might miss out on certain gigs where reading is essential. So in a studio setting, reading can be a huge advantage. It can make you more versatile and allow you to work in environments where quick reading is expected. That being said, even in studios, not everyone reads well. In fact, most guitar players aren't highly skilled sight readers. They might be able to read slowly or figure out a part over time, which still helps, but it's not quite the same as being able to sight read fluently. Now, if you're an adult learning guitar for rock, folk, or country, you're probably not going to see a lot of standard notation. Instead, you'll be working more with chord sheets and tablature or tabs. These styles rely heavily on rhythm, feel, groove, and listening. So being able to quickly glance at a chord sheet and understand what's happening is usually more useful than sight reading every note. With tabs, you get a straightforward, visual way to learn riffs, solos, and even finger-picking patterns without having to read the traditional music staff. For many adult learners, especially those interested in rock, folk, or country, tabs and chord sheets make learning songs a lot easier and more enjoyable. Tabs tell you exactly where to place your fingers, which is perfect for learning popular songs without needing a full understanding of traditional notation. Now that doesn't mean theory goes out the window. I always recommend that adults still learn some music theory so they can understand basic terms and communicate with other musicians. But in rock, folk, and country, knowing the chord progressions and how to read tabs often covers most of what you'll need. Another way to look at this is by thinking about the style of music you want to play. In classical music, reading is an absolute must. Classical musicians are expected to interpret complex pieces exactly as written, so you have to be able to read each note, rhythm, and dynamic marking. There's really no way around it. But what if your focus is jazz? Jazz musicians often read charts and lead sheets rather than detailed staff notation. Reading is preferable in jazz, especially for complex arrangements, but knowing music theory is often more important. Jazz relies heavily on improvisation, so understanding theory and being able to follow chord progressions can get you pretty far, even if you're not the fastest of readers. So while it's ideal to read in jazz, you don't necessarily need to be a great sight reader. Knowing theory and understanding chord changes is often more valuable in this style. Now, something that confuses a lot of people is the difference between being a good reader and being a good sight reader. A good reader can figure out the notes on a page and work through them, but they might need some time to do it. A sight reader, on the other hand, can pick up the sheet music and play it right away in real time without stopping to think. That's a tough skill to master. And most guitarists aren't highly skilled sight readers because we don't typically rely on sheet music as much as, say, a piano or orchestral musician. If you're aiming for professional work like pit orchestra or studio gigs, being able to sight read will set you apart. But for the average player, it's okay to be able to read music slowly and figure it out over time. So does a guitar player need to learn to read music? Well, it depends on your goals. For classical or studio work, reading can be essential. For jazz or popular music, theory might be more important than notation. And if you're playing rock, folk, or country, learning tabs and chord sheets often makes more sense. No matter what you choose, just remember that learning even a bit of reading and theory can expand your musical abilities. It's all about making yourself a more versatile player, so let me know in the comments, do you read music? Do you want to? And don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you found this helpful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.